Looks like are we good to go, Jess? I think we are.
Yeah,
Uh
let it rip.
yeah, so today's uh today's webinar is called Test Driven Development. How to improve developer efficiency by testing at the right level. And we're excited that you guys came. Wrong one. There we go. Okay, cool. So, commonly asked questions that before we kind of get started is that this event is recorded. So, be mindful of, Shy, don't pick your nose or, anything that you wouldn't want someone to see. Or, the questions that you'll be, posting that type of stuff. This recording is going to go on YouTube and all over the internet. So, be
Without
nice.
editing, like it's live without editing.
I think it'll be edited, but so
I can bring down Cypress.
you could,
Yes,
yes.
you did a mistake. Okay, made a mistake. No,
The other thing is that if you want to continue this discussion over on our Discord, you can do so at the link right there. And the Discord channel is happening. We just crossed, I think it was over 8,000 people. It's growing like super fast. It's where all the cool kids are. So make sure you go and hit up the Cypress Discord. And as well, if you like this event and you haven't already, you can sign up for future events like this. We have them monthly at community.cypress.io. We cover a wide range of topics. So yeah, go over there and check it out. A little bit about us. My name is Jordan Powell. I am a senior software engineer on the component testing team here at Cypress. And I am basically the host for today. And I'm excited about that because I feel like one of the coolest jobs I could always think of as a kid was like a game show host, right? That's like one of the coolest jobs you could have, I felt like. So I kind of I kind of feel like I'm living out my childhood, dreams a little bit. But so then we have my fellow my teammate on the component testing team, Adam Stonelord, which is such a cool last name, Adam. So just letting you know, it's super cool. And a good
Thanks.
friend, good friend Shai Reznik, who is a test expert uh, at highres.io, and he is also the DevRel at Qwik, and we're going to get to some of the cool quickie stuff. All the cool quick type of things we can do later. And then Sean Harris, Ronald Williams, and Jess Sweet are also on the Cypress team. They're also going to be just checking, like going through the chat and answering questions and helping us out. So feel free to post questions in the Q&A, and from there we'll be happy to help answer your questions at the end of the presentation if they don't get to it during this part. So today's agenda is pretty straightforward. We're going to sort of define, like, what is TDD, what are some of the common mistakes and pitfalls with TDD, how do you get started with it, and then we're going to use a quick application to do TDD with actually Cypress Component Testing. And we're going to show you kind of a real world scenario and how you would go about doing that. And
is it
then we're going to
a
have a little closing Q&A. Yeah. What's that?
is it a quick application or
It's a quick
quick?
application.
It's a quick application.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
it's kind
Does
of
that make
confused.
sense?
Sort of. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Okay. So slow me if I'm going too quick, but we're gonna keep going through here. So, anyways, a formal definition of what TDD is. It is a noun, and it is a software development process in which you convert requirements to test cases and then track all software development by repeatedly testing the software against the test cases. That's a mouthful. So, Shai, let's hear
Yeah, I have a
your
simpler.
expert definition.
Yeah, simpler definition. I like to dumb down things for myself so I could understand faster. So the way I teach it in my courses is write a failing test, make it pass, and refactor to make it cleaner. So basically, that's, those are the rules, and this is how I define it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Oh, cool. Okay, so let's first talk about like before. I always think it's good before we like start just going deep dive into any sort of technical concept or technology that we explain the benefits. Like, why do I care about this, right? And probably most of you have heard of TDD if you're not already doing it. But Adam, from your standpoint, like, what are the benefits that TDD provides?
Yeah, one big benefit of the TDD approach is you end up writing the tests, right? Like sometimes it's sort of an afterthought. You might, put, if you're doing end-to-end testing, you might push to the end of the sprint to follow up with those types of tests. Test-driven development approach, you write the tests first, so you can't forget to write them or run out of time if you start with it, right? That's one of the things. Another benefit, I think, is it promotes better test writing, right? Because you're thinking from the user's perspective. A lot of times you're writing a test for something that doesn't exist yet. So what you're doing is writing out requirements, right? You're thinking of how is the user going to interact with, this page or this component, and then you're writing requirements based on that. It's a different perspective from thinking about implementation first. So it leads to, I think, better user experience overall, especially when you're talking about testing user interfaces like we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Shai, for you, what are some of the benefits that you've seen when promoting TDD with teams you've worked with?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Adam. Like the key part is actually writing the test, like Adam said. And another thing that I say is, following the Yagni rule. You ain't gonna need it, right? So sometimes when we write the test first, or sorry, when we don't write the test first, right? We write the code first, then we end up with lots of maybe stuff that we ain't gonna need in the future, like maybe we'll need this method or that method and stuff like that, and there's a friction to writing tests, right? It makes it a bit slower, a bit. Once you get the habit, it becomes second nature, but it makes you stop and think. And because you stop and think, you might not add a bloat or loads of code that you ain't gonna need. So that's another benefit to writing TDD or test first.
Yeah, yeah, and for me, kind of along the same lines of that is I've found that oftentimes if you think about the end first, not only will you sometimes not do Yagni, basically test things you're not going to need or implement things you're not going to need, but also you find gaps in requirements before you start. So it's a great way of, I would rather find out I don't have a requirement to know exactly what success of this feature or bug fix or whatever the use case is before I start than at the end, right? And then at the end, you've done all this work and you're like, shoot, like I need to figure out the answer to this, right? So I think that for me, yeah, that's one of the big benefits that I've seen.
Yeah, and by the way, I didn't like presented myself, so like just to give context. So what I did is I develop a system for testing more effectively. I call it test effective development. And like it includes like test driven development, but in a like more, and the whole thing is about like trying to find the balance between like how efficient we are and how much confidence do we get from the tools or the strategies that we use. And I work with teams like as a consultant. I also have courses on Hirez.io and like zero critical bugs. I have a bundle that teaches developers how to write smoke tests with Cypress. So I love testing, I love Cypress, and just that as a context of why am I here and why I'm talking about like testing and stuff like that. But yeah, sorry to cut you off. So we have a survey here, right? What is this? Oh, right.
Jordan, I think
So
you're muted.
Oh yeah, you're muted.
Ah, dang it. Anyways, that's right.
Such a good
Okay,
point.
so
You missed it.
yeah, it's gone too. I forgot it. No, what I was going to say is that so I've rarely met any developer that has said I really don't see the value in TDD. The hard part is really like following the practice, right? And so we found the survey that basically showed that 8% of surveyed developers said that they write tests before they code at least 80% of the time, which is always like it's confusing in my brain when I hear things like this. It's like the people that say I succeed 100, like 50% of the time, I succeed 100% of the time, or like I'm always like, what does that even mean, right? But I think it's true in that, like, a small percentage of people are saying they're following it most of the time, but even those people are agreeing that they don't follow it all the time. So
You're muted again. I can dub you if you want.
Yeah. Okay, so because of that, what are the hurdles that devs face when getting started? Because we already see if there's a lot of benefits, but it's difficult to implement. Like, what are the hurdles that you guys are seeing?
So one thing that keeps coming back whenever I work with a new team or a team that either never tested their code ever or tried testing and didn't work, and also tried TDD and they just like, it's too scary, or too like, too much of a task alongside the already busy schedule and like, sprint and all that stuff. So most of the time is like trying to learn how to test while trying to write the test before, and it's like too complex to get them both together. And also for me, and from my experience, whenever I get into, like, for example, a new framework or a new language or something like that I'm not yet familiar with the API. For example, when I started with Qwik, I didn't start with like test first. I started by learning, the API and understanding the mental model and all that stuff to reduce the cognitive load. So I will be, familiar with how to write the code in that framework or that way, or, even like experiment and stuff like that. And then I learn how to add the test after, like just what are the mechanics and all that stuff. And that's and then when I feel comfortable, I reverse the process. So this is a hurdle, like trying to do it all together is something that I see keeps repeating. And I just gave a glimpse of what I like to do to tackle that.
Yeah, Adam, what do you feel is like a resistance from your standpoint?
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, yeah, testing is a difficult thing in general, especially when you're talking about testing like front end user interfaces, which is what we're going to be talking about with component testing. So trying to write everything up front when it comes to testing can be, I think, challenging, right? So one place I feel resistance is like when you're trying to write a test for a component that doesn't exist yet. I think TDD is a lot simpler when you talk about like adding coverage for things that for like bugs that come up or things that already exist, right? Because you might already have an existing test structure. One thing specifically with Cypress that I do when like I'm writing a test for something that doesn't exist yet is I lean heavily on like test IDs, like data psi attributes. And then when I'm making the actual component to fulfill the test requirements, I can use those IDs, and then I can come back later and refactor my selectors and make them better. And yeah, I think that's one way to approach it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think one of the things that for me, it's like it's also very like it feels very taboo to like see failing tests. It's like like it's like this red light, like you're failing, right? And it's like something you're like back off. I'm just I'm trying to get this thing to work, right? So like, what would you say, Shai? are ways you can sort of like overcome that overwhelmingness that you see of tests failing, and you're like, I know why it's failing. You want to like, you're fixing one problem and then you see this other problem pop up. Like, I get distracted. I'm like, well, let's fix this problem, right? But this is actually not the problem. It's this thing over here. So for me, I'm like the cat on a laser. I'm super distracted, right? So what are some ways that you would recommend to sort of get over the like the red line complex or something like that?
Yeah, it's funny. I gave a talk last year in ngconf about this, like about like the process of TDD, not for component testing specifically, but more like like V-test or just like test, and how I go about it. And the, I can sum it, and I showed like side by side, like, okay, we're used to having these errors of like in production, like in the console log and seeing the red, and we're like already conditioned to
That's bad,
associate it
right?
with like waking up in 3 a.m. and going to production and fixing in production the bug or something like that. When people see like the red lines in the or the red error messages in the test, we already associated with like, oh my god, it's 3 a.m. again, and all that stuff. So because TDD is all about writing the failing test, the first red, we need to become okay with like seeing that, and you need to strive for it. And I think it comes down to developing a habit. It's all about a habit, because most of us, as you saw, like 92%, okay, we're used to developing the code. We already are used to the API, right? And just testing it in the browser manually, and just like seeing that it works, clicking on stuff. And those are and I love it when people say, I'm not a tester, like I don't write tests, I don't run tests or something like that. And I always like come back with, well, you are a tester, because someone told it to me when I first began. You are a tester, you're just not an efficient one because you're doing it manually, right, in the browser. But you are a tester, right? You are testing. You don't like ship blindly, to like push to GitHub. So it's about a habit. And the problem with like developing it as a habit is that there are too many questions. It's like the blank sheet of paper, scenario or something like for writers, right? Like you don't know where to begin or where to start from, right? And too many possibilities and too many options to where do I start? Where do I set up like the mock, or do I like click on the thing, or do I expect stuff? And so I remember when I first like my first ever workshop, like teaching a team about my process. It was like me sharing my what works for me. I tried to simplify it, and while trying to simplify it, I it came down to this like really easy to use algorithm, like like a process. Like, okay, I'm staring at the blank screen, okay, or blank like test file. What's the first question that I ask myself? And it came to this like 9 or 10 questions that you can ask yourself, which will get you out of any like like I don't know, like getting stuck without knowing how to continue. And that's what I teach in like my courses and stuff like that. And we'll probably go over like some of it that is more relevant to component testing, because these 9 or 10 questions are usually more of like the traditional test, like just like test, and or what people call unit test, and I call laser test or flashlight test. But yeah, so so the habit can be formed while you are like feel comfortable with writing the code, like the production code, feel comfortable with writing the test after the code, like what to do already, how to mock stuff, how to, if you need to, how to query for an element, for example, to click on it, to expect stuff. Once you're comfortable with that, then the first, like Adam said, like the first thing you could do is, try the simplest, take the simplest task you can have and try just to reverse it. And sort of like, what I always like suggest people to start, like teams that are not used to TDD, is to start a policy of not fixing any bugs until there's a failing test that proves that this bug exists. And it's much easier because it's already there. Like like the bug is there. You don't have to. You just have to prove it, right? And then you fix the bug and the test pass. Oh, I'm a TDDer now. Okay, it's like okay. So that's usually what I recommend, like the gateway drug to full TDD of features and stuff is bug fixing driven development.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, something like
Yeah, and actually, Mark brought up a good point, and it reminded me of actually the. I think the thing that most people get hung up with testing is like, well, I could validate that my feature. They think of it from a feature standpoint or fixing a problem. They're like, well, I could write a test that I fixed this problem, or create the correct solution, and I could just validate it manually, right, in the browser or however you want to do that. But it's actually, for me, the testing is not valuable at that point. It's the most valuable for the future when I'm doing something else that has a side effect to breaking the thing that I fixed, right? So Mark brought up the point of one of the great benefits of TDD is that it actually proves that the test can fail, which was what you're saying, Shai, and that like if the test can't fail, then it's useless, right? Because the failing test is really the thing that we're looking for, is like, I want to make sure that none of the tests fail moving forward. And I think
yeah, that's the
that's
proof.
the big
That's
point. Yeah, exactly.
that's the proof, right? That not only for bugs, but also for like if it doesn't fail, if it passes, you have a problem in your test setup, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
or
exactly.
something that you did. Yeah.
For sure. So, what are some ways then, Shai? I know you've worked with a lot of teams on this, on how to make TDD a little bit more approachable. We said it's valuable, but it can be very difficult to follow. I've always done the arrange, act, assert, the AAA or whatever you want to call it. It's kind of the way I've always gone about testing, like single action or like unit tests. But I know you have a little bit different approach to this. So what is like your recommendations to making this more approachable?
Yeah, I don't know if it's if it's totally different. It's like a slight change. Like you see, like we outline usually the process that I teach. Like the first one, I told you about like the 9 questions, okay? And when teaching about it, I realized that when we try to approach this like monster of like, okay, there's too many possibilities to test here. I try to simplify it, and while trying to simplify it, I got into this like, oh, there's just like 3 questions that I can ask myself at the beginning, or like 3 types of things. Like there are 3 parts to each test. Like if and we need to differentiate because there are like in this wild world of testing, we have overloaded terms like integration test and unit test, and like it means like depending on which book you're reading, it means different things. So that's why I like to differentiate, like, and to break it down into different levels. And like for example, I have like action scope, which is like is it a single action test or a multi-action test, or something like that. Because for example, an end-to-end test will be a multi-action test, right? The test that you see that you grab for a component or for an element, you click on it, and then you grab another component, and you click on that, and it's like a multi-action test. There are single action tests where you only focus on one single action. For example, clicking on the button and seeing that the outcome is correct, or opening up an accordion, just seeing that it's good, and then writing another test for like closing it, and all that stuff, right? Instead of everything in one like test. And that you can isolate each functionality, and also it like documents what are all the capabilities that you can have for this specific component or something like that. Now so this like making it approachable is for like single action test mostly, because in single action tests, you can actually divide, like you said, the arrange, act, assert. I always get confused because it starts with an A. So I like the give and when then because there are different letters. But anyway, it's like, you have a setup where you set stuff up, then you call the action or run the action, which is a single one, and then you check the outcome, right? These are the three parts of the test, no matter how you call it. And what I see most of the time when people are getting stuck is because the natural thing is to try and start from the setup. Like, okay, where do I begin? I begin in the start, the first part of the test. I want to, and usually it's the most complicated thing in the test because you need to, especially if you're dealing with like data and stuff like that, you need to mock and to figure out what do I do here. And so I find it more intuitive to start with the action, because most of the time, what you're testing in terms of action. It's the easiest one, especially like if you're just writing like a unit or like a single action test in like the unit test style, right, in the like jest or something like that, where it's like calling a function, so just call the function, that's the
easy.
action, right? That's easy. And in Cypress, for example, in component testing, you can like, what do I need, what is the action here? Do I need to click on the accordion? Oh, that's my action. Okay, click on the accordion. Great. How do I get I need to get this accordion, right? Component or something like that. Okay, cool. So I'm like deconstructing from that. Usually from then I go to the outcome because, I'm trying to think, okay, I'm clicking, what is the outcome that I want on the screen? Like, do I want to see something? And also it's like the less, it's the next level thing of like difficulty, because, it's easier to expect stuff than to set up stuff, right? So I'm expecting stuff, and then I go back and I'm asking myself, okay, in order for me to click on something, I need to grab it, and in order for it to work, I need to like maybe mock something, or maybe like grab for something or get some data before I fill up the form, or before something like that. So I have the outcome, I have the the action, and then the setup becomes easier because it derives from the outcome, like what will be the input that will cause this output, right? And then then I have like that's the way that I found it like much easier. And also like we don't have like all the time right in this webinar to go deeper, but usually in this like setup and outcome, or like input and output, I found out that there are only like 3 types of inputs and outputs, and that's it. And once you know these 3 types, right, like it's easy to figure out like you just like narrow it down to like these 3 types, and just ask yourself, okay, what is this type here? Is it like an direct input? And this is more relevant, again, not for component testing, but for traditional tests. So that's why we won't get into it now. Like I said, I'm getting into the courses. But once I have all these parts, then I have like the perfect script for my production code, because I have like the recipe. Okay, now I know what I need to implement, and it becomes easier, right? Like, oh, I need to have a component here. I need to have like this way to grab it, a role, or like a data star or something like that, and that's the outcome, right? And so I have like a spec, and that's why they call spec files.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's a great, it's very, very interesting to hear that. I've never thought about it going from that approach, but I think that makes a lot of sense. Okay, Adam. So switching gears to, I know we talked a little bit, especially that last part, a little bit more on like how end-to-end testing is like multi-action, and almost everything you do in a Cypress like end-to-end test is like an assertion at some level. If you can't get something, then the test fails, right? Like you expect almost everything you do is like a multi-action in that standpoint. But and then we talked a little bit about like traditional like unit testing, and kind of how we refer to what Shai was talking about, a single action test. But shifting gears to component testing, how would you say component testing is sort of lends itself to being like TDD friendly? And this is one of the things like I wasn't the biggest believer in component testing when I first heard about it, but once I actually saw it and saw the answer to the question, I was like, oh, like I actually really get it. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So with component testing, like you're testing your components in isolation, right? And that's different from how you would do ED. You're spinning up an entire application, entire server, right? So that just means like there's less things to mock, less things to deal with on the page, right? You can interact directly with your component. So I think in general, it's just easier to write tests for components, generally speaking. On the next slide, we're going to get into more about how Cypress component testing specifically helps with TDD. But I think component testing in general can sort of help drive like a test-driven mentality like across the entire team, right? Because what you're doing when you write a component test, if you do it well, then you're basically creating like a set of almost like documentation for component APIs, right? So like what type of props the component takes, what it's responsible for, which is defined by like its test cases and the things that we expect it to do, right? So like on our team, if I find myself working with a component and I have to modify it or add some things to it, oftentimes the first thing I'll do is go to where the component test is written and where the team has written the component test, and I can look at it and see these are the things that the component's responsible for. This is the API that we use, and basically have examples right in front of me of how to invoke this component and the different states that it can be in, right? So I think having those tests written for your different components is good from like a team sense to help drive that like testing mentality, right?
Yeah, for sure. And kind of to go, you had mentioned some of this a little bit, but for those of you who are for those who are like maybe not familiar with component testing, either haven't done it or not like using it on a regular basis, I know you're getting ready to demo it, but like, can you speak from a high level, like a little bit more about component testing specifically?
Yeah, for sure. So compared to some more traditional component testing tools like React testing library and things like that, Cypress renders your component in a real browser, right? So along with that, you get like all your dev tools that you're used to in your browser. It's just like looking at an application, but it's just isolated to your component, right? So that does a few things. Like it's faster to set up, like I said before, because you don't like there's less mocking, there's less things to deal with, right? You're just looking at a single component in isolation, not a lot of side effects. The tests run faster, so that makes it faster for iteration when you're doing development. But because you have this visual environment in the browser, right? It's not just for testing. It's sort of like an environment in which to build your component in isolation from the rest of the application, right? And that kind of lends itself to like these modular principles that we want to follow when we're building components, right? Because if you build it without the context of the larger application, it doesn't end up being coupled with like all the other things in the app, right? It sort of forces you to make deliberate decisions about how developers can use the component, right? So Cypress, yeah, it gives you an environment to build your component, is what I would say. And so, like a lot of times when I'm creating a new component, I'll start with a Cypress test, and I write about this in the blog post that we put out on the Cypress blog that I think we'll link to in the slides. But when I start a component, right, I mount it in the Cypress test runner, and it hot reloads while I build it, and I can watch it. So I don't have to spin up my entire application and navigate to whatever place the component lives in the app and modify the state of the app to make my component show up in a certain way every time I'm making changes to it, right? I can do that all right inside the test runner instantly.
Yeah, I felt like when I always would get stuck with those tickets where it's like some stateful like form, and then like I would always have to like fix something on like the fifth page, and so I'd have to like before I'd always have to fill out like 5 pages of data I didn't care about just so I could get to the last button so I could make sure it does the right thing, right? This is like a perfect use case. It's like at some point, if it was painful enough, I would just write an end-to-end test that would automate me to get to the point that I would, care about. But in this case, it's like significantly easier. You just mount the component and you just interact, update the styles, update the functionality, really any part that you're talking about. So yeah, that's the thing that I'm super excited about. So all right, Adam, I will stop sharing my screen and I would love for you to do a quick demo of Cypress component testing using
Wait, is it a
Qwik.
quick demo or?
Yeah, like I would say pretty quick. We only have like 10 minutes or so of a demo.
Oh, okay. So it's not okay. I
Yeah,
had to. I had to.
I know, yeah.
yeah. So we didn't mention this, but the CT team just released a framework definition API. So there are a few major frameworks that we support sort of out of the box that allow you to write component tests with those frameworks and mount your components in the Cypress test runner. But there's a lot that we don't have support for. And so the API allows teams that have their own frameworks, or really anybody, to write a framework definition for their specific framework. And then people can install those packages, and then you get the same sort of like first-class wizard experience that you would get with one of the frameworks that we support out of the box, like React or Vue. And so Jordan and Shai have been working on an integration for Qwik, which is a framework that Shai works on. And so yeah, I'm going to use that integration, the framework definition that they created to show a simple example of fixing a bug with TG. So
Do you want me to give like a one sentence about Qwik, so for people who are not familiar?
Yeah, give us a quick rundown.
Hey, it's my like dead joke.
Oh,
You're
sorry.
stealing my dead jokes. Only Mishko can steal my dead jokes. Anyway, so Qwik is a new kind of framework that was created by Mishko Havery, the creator of Angular. It runs by a startup called Builder.io, which is a wonderful product by itself. I joined the team a year ago from the community side as a DevRel for the community to help, like, create a community around it and to increase it and stuff like that. Why did I was focused on testing. I'm still heavily focused on testing, but I spend all of my free time like helping this framework succeed. And why did I do that? Because after it took me a while, but when it clicked, I realized that this framework is opening up a new generation of web frameworks, and it does it by doing something that we call JavaScript streaming. So how, like, back in the day when you wanted to watch a video, right, you needed to download the entire like 3 GB file, and just to watch the end right of the movie or something like that. And then we have streaming, right? We can stream on YouTube, on Netflix, and just can jump to the end of the. Now, the problem with today's JavaScript apps is that we keep adding more features and we increase the size. And no matter which solution we tried, server-side rendering and lazy loading manually and all that stuff, it helps, but it doesn't prevent it because it's still manual and it's still you need to chase after it and stuff like that. And what Qwik's innovation is the ability to take any size app and stream just the tiny chunks of JavaScript to the user based on the page that they are in, and so it instantly load the page. Even if you have like a 100 megabyte app, it instantly load the page because it's server-side rendered, and it start to prefetch on a different thread all of the possible interaction points on the page. And then it does something also new, which we call lazy execution. not lazy loading, but executing the code on demand, because the code already is there in the cache. So it's like buffering in video, right? You buffer the next couple of interactions that the user can do, and it's instant. So I call it like the generation of instant web apps, because this is what it does. So this is Qwik in a nutshell.
Thanks, Shai.
No
Cool.
problem.
All right, I'm gonna dive into it here. All right, everybody see?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. All right. Yeah, so we have a very basic, this is the Qwik starter app. So if you generate a Qwik app, this is what you get. So I'm running this application locally here, and we have this counter, and you can decrement and increment, but there's a bug in the increment where it like doubles itself instead of incrementing by 1.
What did you do? You ruined the framework, Adam. Oh my God.
Yeah, I broke Qwik. So yeah, this is an example of how we can use the Qwik adapter and TDD process to write a test to fix this bug. So I'm going to head over to my project here. So the first thing that we need to do is add the Qwik.
Can you zoom in a little bit, Adam?
Oh yeah, sure. How's that?
That's better.
I like the theme. It looks like you broke to the, like, hacked the Pentagon or something like that.
Yeah, is that good?
Yeah, it's good.
Cool. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is install the Cypress Qwik integration, the framework definition. So the package here. It's called Cypress CT Qwik. So we'll add that. And then now we can open Cypress. And so this project not yet configured for component testing with Cypress. So we will do that with the wizard setup. So we'll open Cypress here. We'll see we're not configured for component testing. And if we go in here, we'll see that we have Qwik selected here. Cypress detected that the project's using Qwik. But when you have these community plugins installed, you can see them in the list right alongside of all of the other frameworks that we support in the Cypress core. So that's where you'll see those. And then we can set up with our dependencies. Right now, we don't officially support TypeScript 5, working on that. So we'll just skip this. And it creates a bunch of config files for us. And now we can open up component testing in Chrome. Let me move this over here. I like to sort of side by side the test runner. Cool. Okay, so we don't have any specs yet. This is our counter component. And there's a bug in it somewhere, but we will get to that. But right now, let's look at the support file that Cypress generated for us. So you'll see that we're importing this command called mount from Cypress CT Qwik, which is the integration that Shai and Jordan have been working on. And then we add that as a custom command to the Cypress global. So this allows us to call sci.mount in our component test. And this is how we're going to take the Qwik component and mount it into the DOM in a spec. So the first thing we'll do is create a test in here alongside of our counter. Usually we recommend that we put component tests just right next to the components where they live. It's good, like I was saying before, sort of a documentation. So you can see the Cypress runner pick that one up. So we have that there. So we're going to write a very simple test to make sure that this is working correctly. And we know that it's not right now. So we're going to basically write a test to prove that this bug exists, like Shai was saying before. So we're going to say that it increments and decrements by 1 specifically, because it is still doing that. But okay, so the first thing that we do in the component test is mount this component, right? So we're going to take the counter, import it here, and then we're going to mount it. And from here, we can open up the test and sort of use the test runner to guide the rest of how we write it now that the component is going to actually be mounted in the DOM. So open this up. It doesn't look great because we don't have any styles. So just for the sake of making this look good, we'll go into our component file and import our global style sheets. Like that. Cool. All right, there we go. Looking much better. All right, so now we can, so we have this is all the setup that we need, right, for this this test. Normally it'd be probably a lot more complicated. There's providers or other mocks or things that you need. But in this case, just mounting it is all the setup that we need to do. So now getting to the action. So we can use our selector playground here to try to get a good selector for this. So there's a class on this one, so it'll let us do that. And we want to check that this contains 10. So we're starting off at the right spot. So that's the default, right? Now we want to click the this button here. We can use that's not a great selector. So I'm gonna write my own selector for that. So we can say thought it contains button with the text plus. So it's going to look for a button that has this text in it. And then we want to click it. And let's click it twice, actually. Then we're going to do this same assertion here and make sure that our counter has 12 because we expect it to increment by 1 twice. So it should have 12 now. And then we can decrement it by clicking the minus button twice. And then we can put another assertion that checks to make sure that this is back to 10 now.
So this is
to make sure that it's not, yeah.
This is a multi-action test. This is an example of the multi-action test.
Yes, exactly. So we're doing setup, checking an outcome, then taking action, checking outcome again, and then taking another action, and then checking outcome again. Yeah. So,
but one of the cool things here is like before in end-to-end testing, like selecting elements was often very painful, right? But like a component test like this, you know, you're only testing one thing at a time. So getting an element that contains plus is like pretty safe that you're not going to double that, like change that down the line where that would become flaky. Whereas an end-to-end test, you wouldn't really want to do that in most cases because it's much more likely that would you know, become flaky or break over time. So that's one of my favorite things about doing this type of testing. It's just much easier.
Yeah, because we're scoped down, right?
Yeah, and it's not dogma. You know, I made the remark just to, you know, connect it to what we talked before, just so people could, like, you know, understand, because we talked about like single action, we talked about multi-action. This is a multi-action, and it's like I said, it's not dogma. You don't have to, like, you know, always like strictly follow like only single action test. For example, this is a test that we write for a bug, right? So sometimes we want to simulate this specific bug. Now, a caveat to multi-action tests in terms of like efficiency, right? The confidence and efficiency, they give you, you know, much concise, like, you know, you only have one test to worry about, right? But sometimes when you do multi-action, now if you have a bug in one of those actions and you have like lots of tests that are doing the same action, right, all of them will fail, right? So it has this caveat to think about when you are choosing an approach, but it doesn't mean that it's not the right approach for for certain things and stuff like that, especially when you try to fix a bug and try to simulate a bug, and sometimes you need multiple actions and not just one.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point. So when we save this test, we'll see that it fails in the runner because we're expecting this to have value 12, but it doubles itself twice and then gets to 40. So if we head into our counter component, it's pretty obvious what the issue is. We have this on-click handler for our plus button, and right now it's adding the value of count to itself. But what we actually want to do is like the same thing that the decrement button does, except increment instead of decrement. So then we can save this and our test will instantly rerun, and now it's passing. So now, yeah, the benefits of having this in the code base then going forward would be, if someone comes in and makes changes to this, then we'll instantly see that the test fails and they can't move forward with the change. So it's sort of cementing the correct behavior in automation, right? So that was the extent of the demo there.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. No, that's my favorite thing. It's a really fun thing to demo component testing because it's like it's very valuable, like really quickly, and I think that's really cool. And the awesome thing is that this is a brand new framework. We're just released the first like alpha version or whatever yesterday or something. So, but you can show it shows the maturity of how easy it is to integrate with this. So yeah, super excited. Let me share screen recording from you. There we go. And go back here. So that's pretty much the extent of today's webinar. I wanted to share a few resources. We have the blog post that Adam recently put out talking about like how to use TDD, examples, specifically around component testing. And then we have pretty extensive documentation at docs.cypress.io around all things testing, all things Cypress, and then a lot around component testing as well. And then Shai, you want to share some of a quick synopsis of some of your courses?
Yeah, so like I said before, I will drop the link here in the chat. So what I found out is that a lot of while teaching and consulting and helping out teams, that teams usually don't write end-to-end tests because they either like leave it to the QA team, or it's like it's the slowest, it's like the long, like the hardest to maintain and such. But there is very like a lot of value that I found in writing smoke tests, which is a subset of end-to-end test, which tests only the critical parts of your app. So I made a course, and also teaches about how like this methodology for development teams, because I feel that it's an important topic to learn because it's the low hanging fruit that all developers can write and maintain. And I actually written a open source library called Lembas, like the Lembas bread, that help you out with setting up the database and to a specific point and taking a snapshot specifically for smoke testing. So check it out if you want, if you like to have a fun course, like a funny course, unusual about Cypress. Check it out as well. And soon we'll have more like quick specific courses. So check it out as well. And that's me.
Yeah. Awesome. As well as we have some community resources. We have a cookbook of a whole bunch of code examples by Marat, our ambassador. So you guys feel free to check out those as well. And now at this time, we will open it up to the Q&A. Looks like we have a few of them in here. Glenn is asking, when developing in TDD mode, is it common or he wrote best practice to leave the test environment up as Adam was doing, kind of like as you were building it? So you want to speak to that, Adam?
Yeah, they asked if it was best practice or something like that. I don't know about that, but it's my personal preference to do that. Yeah, I think it's a good environment for quick iteration. And like we were saying before, like especially if you're building a component that only appears in certain application states or has like a specific context in your larger application. Yeah, it gives you the ability to develop very rapidly with just that component. So yeah, I like to use the test runner as a way not just to test the component, but to build it like actually from the ground up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Julian asks, if I'm using a different test framework as Jest or Vetus or something like that, should I use Cypress as a complement, or should I try to move completely to Cypress? I'm using Cypress only for UI testing, user interaction tests. I'm assuming like for like end to end. So, yeah, I would, for me, I would say at the end of the day, testing is around confidence. Like if you feel confident that the tests you have currently work good for you and your team and everything, then I would say like I'm not going to sit here and tell you must switch, but I would say if you compare, like the value of the test you get typically from unit testing a component in something like Jest versus like what Adam just demoed. I think there's definitely a higher value that you get when doing testing that way. I would say for me personally, I've used it not necessarily as it's something like for me moving forward in projects. That's the tool I use for almost pretty much most forms of testing. But I would say also as I get bugs or anytime I want to refactor something, it's a really great time to implement component testing because oftentimes the unit tests we write for components are often tied to the implementation internals of the component itself. And so anytime we refactor it, will break our tests. And so I found that oftentimes before refactoring is a really good time to make that switch as well. Let's see, guys, when is Cypress supporting Safari? We have good news for you. I don't. I can't. Your name is it's all skewed, so I can't tell what it is. But we do have support for it. It is an experimental flag that you just have to enable, and it's I don't remember maybe someone can post a link to that the actual name, the experimental Safari or something like that. But yeah, you just add that and we have support for that. Let's see. Here's one for you, Shai, I think. So does component testing only work if Cypress is in the web project of an application? What if the end-to-end project is in its own project and not inside the web project?
Okay. It's kind of trying to wrap my head around so basically you can have both, right? If you have like an app which has Cypress for end-to-end tests, right? You can have both the Cypress tests for like the end-to-end test and also your component test. And like you saw, you can choose if you want the component test or and it's in the same configuration, right? You have like a section where you can configure the component configuration like for component testing, right? And you have like the end-to-end one. So that's so you can have it separately, and depending if you're working like in a monorepo setup like NX or something like that, then most of the time you'll have your component library in a separate package, And for that, you probably would want only like the component testing if it's like a component library, right? That you're building like in-house. And you'll have your app, which probably will have like another project there that is like for, just setting up the end-to-end configuration, all that stuff outside of the app. So it's depending on your project structure, basically.
Yeah. Looks like we are at time, but I saw one last question. Someone was asking the performance of component testing versus Jest, and this is one of the main questions I had when we started releasing component testing. But actually, I've been recently talking to some like customers or users that have ended up adopting this, and they're actually telling us that it's actually more performant than their Jest test suite, which was a little surprising to me. But basically, sometimes certain versions of Jest in particular can be slower than what you may think. The other thing is for me, I would rather have if I'm going through the effort of writing a test, I would rather have a test that is maybe a little bit more valuable, even if it costs just a little bit from a performance standpoint. Because my time is the most the team members on your team is the most valuable. So that's all that we have for today's webinar. Want to thank you guys for joining the event. And as always,
I have something.
Yeah, Shai wants to say something.
Yeah, I wanted to say something. Thank you, everyone, and from Bonnie as well. Thank you. And I just want to, keep in mind that if you test right, you sleep tight. Okay. And also, I forgot to mention, if Qwik sounds interesting, DM me, join our Discord, get involved. We have lots of cool project, like open source, like ecosystem project, like Qwik UI for the component library, and the Cypress integration, and other stuff, cool stuff like that. So let me know if you want to contribute and join the teams that are building like the ecosystem project as well. And if you want to take part of the wonderful and friendly community that we have, which is also like why we love Cypress as well, which has a wonderful community and friendly community. So we're trying to model like that, and the Angular community, and like other nice and friendly communities. So you're welcome. That's I forgot to mention it before.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys for joining, and being sure to follow all the things that Shai was telling you, the Discord and everything. Feel free to reach out to him or ourselves personally if you have questions, and if not, we will see you next time.
Bye.